So we are going to start. Good afternoon on behalf of the European project TeRRItoria. My name is Esteban Pelayo. I am the director of the European Association of Development Agencies. We are the hub that represents regional economic development experts in 23 countries of the Europe, because we have as well members from accession countries. EURADA, our association, was created exactly 30 years ago. In particular, it was published the official gazette on the 16th of January 1992. So that's why I like to tell you that, because it was this week 30 years ago. You could pass the next slide. I will give you a housekeeping rules. The first thing that I would like to give you is some indications about that. And please take into account that this meeting is being recorded for the reference of the future reference of regional economic practitioner or expert on responsible research and innovation. So we will publish that in YouTube. If you should keep your microphone closed at all times, unless I give you the word where you could switch on the microphone and the camera if you wish. If you want to interact with us, you should write questions or comments in the chat. And my colleague Ivana Ray Almora will give you, will read them, or I will give you the word after each of the session that is composed this webinar. Over the last 2 years, we have organized 12 responsible regions dialogue like this one. And now we are going to make it bigger. We got inspiration because we were able to bring together regional economic practitioners with experts and academics from the knowledge. We have the knowledge of responsible research and innovation. I remember we started more than one year and a half ago with Klaus Sorber-Reiter from the Development Agency of Business Upper Austria, explaining us their brand new smart specialization strategy, Upper Vision 2030, that were a very innovative way to involve different actors in the territory. And we were considering how to involve there the civil society. And we finished just 1 month ago with Angela Simone, from the coordinator of the Transform project, that explain us how to involve civil society in Lombardia and in her project as well. For the final conference, during 2 weeks, for the final conference of TeRRItoria project, during 2 weeks, we are going to make this responsible regions dialogue even bigger. I feel a lot of responsibility because we have already registered more than 200 single participants for the 3 sessions that we have planned. Today, we are going to discuss about something very relevant for all of us, which is citizen participation. In 2 days, next Tuesday, we will discuss about how to make institutional changes in our regional territories. It's not easy to bring and to apply effectively with duration the principle of responsible research and innovation, and we will discuss that. And we will finish just in 1 week now, every time at 2 o'clock Central European time, with the discussion about how will be the next generation of a smart specialization strategy. We will have very good speakers on next week. We will have Mikel Landavaso, one of his colleagues in the Joint Research Center of Seville, Dimitris Pontikakis, and as well Philip McCann, who is a well-known specialist on smart specialization and is working as well with the Joint Research Center coming from the University of Sheffield. Today's session, as I told you, is focused on the involvement of civil society. I believe, as director of the European Association of Development Agencies, that this is a challenge for all regional and local policymakers. This is a problem that has not a simple solution. There are territories that have already achieved that, but it needs leadership, credibility, and trust in the institution. It's not easy to truly engage citizens. I remember when I was preparing my my strategies, my innovation strategies, then the consultation process was something that was to be done, but it didn't really matter when we were in the territories. And especially it didn't matter during the monitoring and less during the evaluation. So, but we know nowadays in the 21st century that we need to engage the civil society because we need to mobilize all the resources in the territory in order to be effective and to apply good policies. And as well, we know that all the projects that we implement has better impact and last longer if we align them with the needs of the citizens. Apart from the economic development point of view, which is the main activities of the association, the issue of citizen participation has a lot of sides, and in particular, it is clear that strengthening the civil society makes democracy more powerful. It's going beyond voting every 4 years, and this type of involvement in the day-to-day of the policies that are voted makes the society better cohesive and as well help us to have more innovation, especially social innovation, which are always relevant to have more impact, and in particular prevent that certain segment of the society will feel excluded. Today's session, as you see, we have very excellent speakers. Today's session will have 2 parts. So first we will discuss and I will make questions to the different speakers that allow us and will contribute about their experience, what is being done nowadays. And later in the second hour, we will have a second part of the session where we will discuss about recommendations. It will be even more open, not only what they consider, but what they are doing, but what they consider. As I told you, at the end of each of the session, we will have the possibility to give you the word. In particular, we have already appointed the development agency from Bielsko-Biała, the ARSA, that is a third party in the TeRRItoria project and will tell us how they engage citizens in Silesia, the region of Poland. And as well, we will probably have Maite Pelayo from the Ibercivis Foundation of the University of Zaragoza, that is a very good specialist on citizen engagement. So without more introduction, we are going to start the dynamic that we hope that it will be fruitful for all of you and will lead to a dialogue with all of you. Our first speaker, and I thank to all of them, is Francesco Amodeo from DG Regio. DG Regio from the European Commission has capacity building initiative that are helping managing authorities to improve the governance of the cohesion funds. The partnership principle, as we all know, includes civil society organization for the current programming period 21-27. And DG Regio has established as a policy objective to include this citizen in the whole process, from the design to the implementation and monitoring. So, Mr. Amodeo, from your point of view, how is considered citizen engagement in the structural funds? And what specific measures are implemented to facilitate the participation of civil society organization in the management of those structural funds? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esteban. Thank you for the invitation. It's a very great pleasure for me to be with you today. Actually, I was a bit surprised for your invitation because I was not expecting that you will discuss in this kind of framework about citizen engagement. But you demonstrated once again that the innovation is all in you, even in the governance. And having said that, I would like to say that indeed citizen participation is extremely important in cohesion policy. And this has been always the case, but I think, as you were saying, Esteban, from now on and for the new programming period is more than ever. Our commissioner used to say this cohesion policy is a policy for the citizen, but also with the citizen, to underline the fact that we don't want to design policy which doesn't take into consideration also the point of view of those which have the first to benefit. And this applies to all sectors. In some projects that I will refer later on, it's evident to see how this is important when we talk about urban transport or urban policy. But this also affects also the innovation, I would say, because at the end, as you were saying, social innovation is has all an impact in the social and economic development of the region. So indeed, it's important to involve the citizen also on a sector and area which are at first sight difficult to understand for an ordinary citizens. And the partnership principle, in the way it evolves, has underlined the issue of open participation, the open governance. If you remember 30 years ago when we started, there was not code of conduct. There was just a reference to the region, the municipality, and then these things evolve with the period. We started talking about the social and economic partner, environmental organization, and then in the code of conduct there is also reference to all kinds of civil society, including the citizen. This is a demonstration how our policy, not only the policy objective, but also the governance has evolved with during this time. And this, as you said, applies to all moments, because citizen engagement cannot take time only in on a certain specific moment. It should be on continuous. And if we look at the evolution, the first thing that we learn to do is to inform citizens about what we do. Because if they don't understand, it's difficult that they do participate. And this already was an issue for us. An issue for us, the practitioners, which are used to talk in a jargon and bureaucratic way, which is not easy to understand for citizens. So the first challenge that we have to face was how to simplify our work, how to make the communication not good for those which we want to attract. And transparency was then an important element on that. Consultation, I think, is the moment of maturity. We start consulting at the project level, at the level of a strategy, integrated strategy, at the level of a specific strategy, policy investment, but also at the level of the program. In this period of time, my colleagues in the geographical unit are receiving the proposal for the new programming period. And there is a chapter where the managing authority have to describe what kind of consultation are take place. And then you can find different examples from publication on the website, but very more focused, tailor-made group, which try to reach different typology of stakeholders. Because the difficulty is to have a consultation which is open and able to reach all the relevant actors. So in a way that there is not discrimination, there is open to all potential stakeholders, either they are direct or indirect beneficiary of our policy. And then the difficult part, which I think comes from the managing authority, is to provide feedback. Because if we want to work in a continuous, it's important that there is a feedback. So there is a demonstration that what citizen and all stakeholders provide is taken into consideration, or not on board, but at least in consideration for the further evolution. This is a process which does not end with the approval of the program, but continue after all during the implementation and the monitoring. And I think on the monitoring is where citizens are at the moment more involved. There are very more examples of civil society organizations that they do organize monitoring at the level of project, and they do provide very useful comments on how the projects are foreseen and perceived by the final end user. It's a very difficult process. It takes time. It's an investment of resources. I will come back later on this point to give you more detail about what we have done so far. But for the time being, I would like to conclude and that it's a new path, it's a new way of working, and this requires investment. investment on both sides, both from the public authorities and for the citizen, but also for the other stakeholders which have to leave the space for the citizen to enter as well into this discussion. Thank you, Esteban.
Thank you for these excellent words to start, to set the scene, because at the end we are talking about how to implement policies at the regional level, and structural funds are quite relevant. Let's go to the science of involving citizens. And I had the privilege to invite again to participate in one event organized by the project and by EURADA Angela Simone from Fondazione Giano Bassetti. She is the coordinator of the Transform project and is an expert on public engagement. She has been deputy coordinator of Mosaic project, RRI advisor in a project Horizon 2020 called Enlight, and especially she has been taking part in the advisory board of Super MORRI, and MORRI, which are project of indicators that have been very relevant for the community of responsible research and innovation. Aligned with what Mr. Amodeo told us, I would like to ask you why citizen engagement could be a relevant tool for the smart specialization strategy and the new ones as well, the sustainable smart specialization strategy, the S4.
Thank you very much, Esteban, EURADA, and all the consortium of TeRRItoria for this kind invitation, for having me on behalf of Transform project. Transform is a sister project of TeRRItoria, so we share the same objective in try to implement and insert responsible research and innovation in the territories and in the policy making process, especially for smart specialization strategies. So as TeRRItoria and all the other project dealing with this topic, we are trying to really insert good practices of responsible innovation, in particular citizen engagement in our case of Transform, to produce better S3 plan and better implementation of the smart specialization strategy, especially with the focus, of course, of all the Green Deal connected topics, policies, and activities. What I can say from our experience in Transform is really aligned with what we have learned and listened to the previous speaker, Francesco Amodeo. Of course, the focus of the citizen engagement is to try to serve the people for which territories, cities, regions, institutions have to produce public decision, meaningful public decision for the common good. So it's really important to ground these processes, because it's the only way to reach, to collect and gather ideas, opinions, views from citizens. There are no proxy to collect actual ideas, views, and opinions for citizens, but you really need to use this strategy to have and collect their active and actual voices. And this is really important. But I really would like also to share another reflection. As we have listened to Francesco Amodeo as well, of course, citizen engagement is really at the very core, at the very heart for a lot of policies in Europe. The cohesion funds, think about the Conference of the Future of Europe, or if we think about the missions in which territories like cities and regions are the actors of these relevant and important policies, and citizen engagement is an activity foreseen in the mission. So we really need to implement citizen engagement. But what is important is to implement meaningful citizen engagement, not doing citizen engagement for the sake of doing citizen engagement. So we need good strategy, we need good methodology, we need high quality citizen engagement, which entails competencies, capacities, and resources. So if I can sum up in 4 keywords of a good citizen engagement process, we need integrity for citizen engagement. So as I said before, high quality citizen engagement, which means to have professionals that have experience in doing such a thing. And also people within the authorities, within the institution that can manage these approaches, that know the differences between the methodologies. And this is what we are trying to do in our process, also to train and educate the people in the regions involved in our process to distinguish between the methodologies, what suits for their own interest and territories to really have an effective citizen engagement process. The second keyword is feasibility. So to ground processes, take into consideration the time and the procedure constraints that you can have as an administration. You cannot be really ambitious. You really need not to have ambitious processes if you know that you have just a couple of weeks or 1 month to run a citizen engagement process. And so you really need to deal with these constraints. The third is actionability. You really need to use the results emerged from the process. It's not just collecting ideas and that's it. You have to use the ideas, the views of the citizens to make better public decisions, better policies. And then you need transparency. You need to communicate how to are using the ideas, the data collected by the citizen. This is really, really important. It's a relevant part of a process which is building up trust among institutions and citizens. Without all these elements, the recipe of a meaningful citizen engagement doesn't work.
Thank you very much for giving the 4 principles that will help us to implement effective citizen engagement initiative. Now, after this introduction, we are going to see practical cases, and it's for me a privilege to introduce you Gorka Sanchez from the head of innovation of the region of Murcia Health Service. The health service of the region of Murcia has been for many times introducing the patients in the center of the design of the service. And as well, they have initiative to co-create together with the patients and as well the professionals, providers of innovation, and the development agencies of the region of Murcia, I must say, and the clusters of different companies there. It is a well-organized entity, let's say, at least in innovation, which is using the ecosystem. The region of Murcia has around 1.5 million, something more than 1 million, and is quite, let's say, simple, if you could say, to organize a little bit the ecosystem and to provide and gather that. In any case, it has a lot of merit, and I will want to recognize what Gorka Sanchez is dealing as a head of innovation in the region of Murcia Health Service. And I want to ask you a specific question about that. Why is important, and why you consider that is important, the participation of citizens in the design of the health service? And because you have been working in a project of responsible research and innovation, how RRI could help you to do that on the day-to-day operations?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Esteban, for the invitation. Within In-Demand project, we manage in SMS to involve our professionals to identify their unmet needs and be able to translate them into challenges. And after selecting the winning challenges, to co-create the solutions with the companies. And after this, and finally, to validate these solutions in a real scenario. Now, with TeRRI's project, we have extended this demand-driven co-creation process to the whole society, including the patients, associations, and university researchers from the start of the co-creation, allowing them to propose their own challenges. Why is important the participation of citizens in health service? I believe that RRI is a guarantee of success for any healthcare solutions by taking users, citizens, or patients into account from the very beginning, because it's key to involve the final users to ensure the accuracy of your solution. And from the societal perspective, it's more fair and transparent. How RRI could facilitate this involvement? I think that RRI can help to promote the fair rules of the game in order to guarantee a total involvement of all the stakeholders needed.
Thank you very much, Gorka. Thank you very much for your insights about how to involve RRI and citizens in the health services. We are now going to another practical case on research performing organizations. And for that, we have Tine Rao with us from the Aarhus University. Tine is an expert on citizen engagement. She was part of the community of the MORRI project. Lucky people that were there on responsible research and innovation. And as well, she has been leading a platform on local authorities and communicators engaged in science places that has recently conducted focus group interviews to 30 focus group interviews to research performing organizations. And there is our question. So how we could better engage citizens on research and innovation policies, and if they are experienced on research performing organization where we could engage citizens and or regional governments that we could share.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation and the introduction. I don't know about the expert, but I will try to answer the questions as good as I can. So I will focus on sort of the relationship between theory and practice, and that will also be sort of my focus for both this question and later today as well. And I will say a little bit about engaging citizens and other stakeholders in policy making and implementing AI in RPOs, particularly research performing organizations. So within the time frame available, I will try to highlight the benefits and challenges towards implementing AI at a more general policy level and then more specifically within RPOs. So based on some of the projects I've been involved in, the AI literature and project overall, I will also try to point to a number of recommendations to include citizens in AI innovation policies and strengthen AI within research performance organizations. So even though this is not an easy question to answer in 5 minutes, I will also try just to focus on AI as an overall organizing principle, aiming to address grand societal challenges through responsible, ethical, and inclusive governance of research, technology, and innovation processes, rather than focusing on particular keys and actions. So the AI framework, particularly innovated and advanced within the last decade, as you know, has led to a significant amount of resources and has also to some extent initiated an institutionalization of AI principles and practices within organizations, regions, and national policy level. And perhaps it can be described as a discourse center making, with the words of Owen and colleagues, with an increased focus on values embedded in innovations as opposed to values of innovations, as Ulrike Feld has pointed out. However, with continued possibilities for further mainstreaming, institutionalization, and involvement of the wider society in AI processes to meet and respond to societal needs and challenges, as we also discussed so far today. So responsible research and innovation is not only focusing on outcomes, but equally also on the democratic inclusion of stakeholders, policy agendas, and the research and innovation processes more specifically. So as to the later, sensitivity towards variation in context, from the local to the national and across countries remain key in the translation of RI from theory to practice. And you can say that the RI implementation phase, as well as its sustainability, has proven to be challenging, as emphasized in the RI Tools project, for instance. The fostering of large-scale responsible practices of research and innovation demands for RI to be, and I quote, to be a systematic process from agenda setting and policy design to the evaluation of results and career. And as in RI processes, the public can be involved in all levels of RI policy making, for instance, from vision setting to problem and solution identification, and to the selection of policy instruments, etc. Adding to this established decision-making processes, while also potentially increasing the informative, legitimate, and deliberative foundation of which decisions are made. To mention just a few benefits, as we also discussed today. So, however, we know some of the challenges pertaining to engaging citizens in policymaking relate to a lack of formalized decision-making procedures, limitations to one-way dissemination activities, prioritization of expert stakeholders, etc. And you can say that despite an inclusive governance and capacity building as to science and society across Europe, we also know from the MACES project, for instance, that heterogeneity characterizes the extent to which scientific evidence and advice is used in policymaking, just to mention one example. So with regard to recommendations, particular recommendations to better engage citizens in policymaking, as the actual question was, could be to enforce political commitment to more formalized rules and build on existing and establishing decision-making practices. And also I'd like to highlight some of the recommendations included in the RI Tools project. Some other recommendations of enhancing RI in terms of both policymaking and also within research communities could be one, to build a community of practice for collaboration among all actors and public involvement. Second, it could be to promote specific communication, education, and training on RI. As we know, continued training and education at all levels in university, for instance, remain a key approach to create RI awareness, but also to promote an organizational culture for RI. And there's a lot of training resources available, for instance, through the HERE project. And the third one is to align research practice, funding, and organization strategies towards RI. That could be setting up action plans, building RI into project proposals, and funding instruments could be additional measures. Furthermore, there's a great number of RI indicators available, web-based tools, inspiration for policy guidelines, and so forth are available for inspirations. But there's also some barriers to this, as also mentioned in the RI practice project. So, and I quote, ingrained norms, political pressures and priorities, and a lack of resources, incentives, reward structures, infrastructures, training, and sustained leadership. That's just some of the barriers to implementing RI at universities, for instance. And recommendation to counter some of these barriers could be to alter incentive structures and research excellence indicators toward RI principles. It could be invest much more in organizational infrastructures and increase RI capacity through enhanced research support functions and training. And similar to research integrity, the promotion of RI cannot rely only on individual researchers, but it is demanded as strong institutional commitment and support structures. So establishing systematic but also flexible approaches and mechanisms for engaging the public and other stakeholders remain, despite all the challenges I just mentioned, an important means to opening up governance and innovation processes and minimizing the existing gap between theory and practice. Thanks.
Thank you, Tine. Thank you very much for your practice. And we are going to move, as you all know, Nordic countries are used to be well known for the strength of the civil society. We are going to move from Denmark to Norway. We have there Thomas Becker, who from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and he's an expert on science and technology and has carried out projects connected with sustainability and energy. He has been, during the implementation of the TeRRItoria project, he has been linking his university with the communities in Trøndelag, which I think is very relevant in order to avoid the loss of talent in those rural areas which is sparsely populated. And regarding to that, and following that you are in the middle of two worlds, let's say, the world of the sparsely populated areas and the university, how do you think the academic institution could facilitate the engagement of rural and sparsely populated areas in their policies and make them more aligned with the objective of the whole territory and not the capital city or the region?
Yeah, thank you, Esteban. Excellent question. Even though I would like to start at some other point that is a little bit before this question. So you all heard about that more than half of the population on this earth is now living in cities, which is usually used as an excuse for not looking at the other half any longer. So we have looked at the other half that is not living in cities, and I wager a prediction that we will have a lot of people living outside of cities for a long time. And I'm particularly interested in this short contribution here to this webinar, interested in talking about tensions between the urban and the non-urban, between the urban and the rural. This is a very important topic in Norway. We have a lot of sparsely populated areas, and these communities, they are quite vulnerable. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them do really well, but some of them are quite vulnerable to the loss of young people. And then it's easy for them to get into this vicious circle where you lose young people that don't see any opportunities, but then you don't have the resources and the people to create opportunities for young people. And then eventually the worst case would be that these local communities, that they die. And I think it's not only in Norway that we see this, that regions within countries, that they are left to their own devices and that they are sucked out, so to speak, by the urban centers and wither away. So this grave problem I would like to start with, and I'm happy that Angela talked about meaningful participation. I think this tension has to be acknowledged. So I think it's a bad idea if an academic expert from a university, from a city, now goes to a rural area and tells them how to participate. There is participation already. There's other problems. So there's a tension. And this tension, this creates mistrust. Esteban, you talked about trust as an important resource. And I think that's really crucial when we want to create meaningful participation. So looking at this problem, we have on the one hand these rural communities under pressure, and we have universities, academic institutions that not by coincidence are very often located in population centers. They thrive with this. They attract people to these population centers. These population centers benefit a lot from universities. We know this from research. Also universities and academic institutions profit from this. So this is a really bad deal if you look at this in this way between academic institutions, universities, and sparsely populated areas. And we see now in Norway, only recently, we see more and more of the young people coming to the bigger cities. It's not really big cities in Norway, to the population centers in Norway, that they more and more of them decide not to go back So they move to another city or they settle in the city, and universities play a role in this. It's not only universities, but of course it's the whole context around universities, around innovation, which then creates opportunities for work and for interesting work, for exciting work. So that's, there we have a problem, a tension. And what we were looking into in the Norwegian part of TeRRitoria project, we were looking into how we could create meaningful exchanges of knowledge between rural communities, sparsely populated areas, and academic institutions. We used then as an example my university. I'm a professor at NTNU, which is the largest university in Norway, and which is located in Trondheim, which is a relatively big city within the region of Trøndelag. So meaningful exchanges, we talking to students, talking to researchers, to teachers, also to people from these rural communities, we saw a lot of barriers, of course. This is a mega trend. Urbanization has been going on for at least 100 years, and it's very difficult to, as a little project, to make a dent in this. But I think what we managed to do was to identify key barriers. And I think it makes sense to distinguish there between practicalities that we also encountered in TeRRitoria. We did experiments, we tried out things, and we encountered practical problems that are rather easy to solve. If you throw a little bit of money at it, resources, you could solve this problem. So one example for this is that we wanted more students to go to these sparsely populated areas in their internships. But then you get, of course, the problem that they need accommodation. That's it's a small problem which keeps many students from doing this, from getting to know about everything outside the place of their study. But there's also some more fundamental problems that I think I could talk about this for hours, I won't. That a lot of this boils down to an image, an idea of the university as an urban phenomenon, which is often not acknowledged. That universities are best when they are in the center, when they attract people from the outside to the center, when there's a lively street life around, you know, these images of a university, where one university then connects to other universities globally, to other population centers, to global hubs, preferably, and where we have an idea, at least at NTNU, but I'm sure you're familiar with this from your countries, an idea of international excellence. That's a guiding star at the university. And this guiding star makes it impossible, if you subscribe to this idea, it makes it impossible to do work that has local relevance and that is much closer to you. So there is created a kind of idea that good science is internationally relevant and is connected to other population centers, other universities all around the globe. So that's the barriers. I think almost finished with my 5 minutes. The pandemic has shown us that knowledge work, and that's what we are engaged in when we are doing knowledge exchange. The knowledge work has done quite well during the pandemic. And I think that in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we will see a huge challenge to universities because we have now seen that universities actually don't need a physical place, that they are much less bound to a physical place, to an urban place, that they are actually can function quite well with distance learning, with meetings, with online meetings and so on. I'm not saying very well, but quite well, that they are more and more detached from their physical space. I say it's a big problem for university as they are right now. They have invested a lot of money in real estate and in a certain way of conducting their business. But I foresee a challenge to this status quo, which gives us a lot of chances when we're talking about another kind of university that is much more distributed, which is much more interested in what is going on very close, which is there also for rural communities. And I could go on forever, but I stop
But
here.
we need to go on. Oh, thank you very much, Thomas. Very insightful vision. We are going to go from Norway to Romania as well in rural environments and how to engage not so well connected places. For you to know the Romanian regional structure and governance is getting more and more decentralized. This year, with this programming period, the development agencies, which is the main structure for regions in Romania, as well managing authorities on structural funds. And some of them were pioneering, making smart specialization strategies on the previous program and as well in this one. And we have the luxury to have Agata Filimon with us, which is the head of the smart specialization team of the development agency at the Art Northeast. They have developed a platform to establish applied innovation in some communities which are not connected with the main capitals of the region. And by the way, I inform you that the development agencies in Piatra Neam, which is a small city compared with other two big cities in the region. So the very decentralized region itself. So Agata, I would like to ask you a question, being the head of the smart specialization, how development agencies could practically engage the citizen? What is your day-to-day operation and how you could involve them particularly in the smart specialization to make that as a better shared initiative with the territory? I cannot hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today to this very interesting debate. I will start with a small errata corrige. I'm not the head of the smart specialization department, but I'm just the head of one of the teams involved in the elaboration, implementation of the smart specialization. Indeed, as you said, we are a very decentralized region in the sense that not the big economic poles are different from the headquarters, the city where the headquarters of the agencies are. And maybe that helped us also having a decentralized mindset and approaching things from a different perspective. You asked me in general how we can decentralize the decision making in the economic and social development policies. And I think the example of the way of working within smart specialization strategies can be multiplied at a larger scale. So I will talk more about this process of decentralization in smart specialization, because this is in essence a bottom-up process. It's not a top-down approach at all. It is a process of establishing priorities, of identifying challenges, gaps, and identifying solutions through a large consultation, through what it's called entrepreneurial discovery process. What does that mean? That means that you address communities, first of all, and it's a fully participative process. And it's participative on one hand, because we comprise quadruple helix players. That is, you involve authorities, companies, academics, and civil society. So this is on one hand. On the other hand, as I said, it's you address communities, but it is true that for smart specialization, we talk about specialized communities, about professional ecosystems. So within those ecosystems, which correspond with strong points in the region from an economic point of view, from economic advantages point of view, in this economical sectors, we address the quadruple helix. So where do we have citizens here? Here, of course, if you talk about more structured interlocutors like companies, like academics, like authorities, we're used to have them at the round table. They have a voice. They have all the means to express themselves. But about citizens, when you say civil society, first of all, you understand NGOs, and on the other hand, simple citizens. Of course, our interest is to push decentralization up to the final level of the citizen that usually does not have a voice in all this process unless he's organized somehow. And let's see, what can we do? So first of all, the full process of consultation, this entrepreneurial discovery process, is public. That means it's public from the beginning, from the invitations to consultations, invitations to focus groups. All invitation is made as public as possible so anyone can access it, even simple citizens that have an argumented point of view in a specific economic domain. Then we address, of course, professional communities at regional level. What can we do next is to go from a regional level to small micro-territorial levels. And that is what we have tried to do. You have to keep the fil rouge of the specialization at regional level. So you follow some priorities, some strategies at a macro level. However, you try to find common points with smaller communities. Maybe your scope is narrower from multiple points of views. For instance, you may address 7 sectors at regional level. You may only find opportunities for 2 smart specialization levels at community level. Nevertheless, smaller needs are as well importantly needs. And smaller voices are as well important because you never know, every big idea started from a singular point. So the next step is to push decentralization of all this professional approach, also combined with the geographical decentralization. So move from professional community to professional and geographical community. So this is one way to ensure that citizens have a voice in this smart specialization process. But about this decentralization, maybe we'll talk a little bit further on.
Thank you very much, Agatha. We start the dialogue with the public, and one of the members of EURADA want to say something which as well was a third party in the TeRRItoria project. This Jan Sienkiewicz, Mr. Sienkiewicz from the development agency of Bielsko-Biała, want to share something about how they are engaging citizens. This development agency is very much connected. Hello, Jan.
Hello. I'm very sorry that I have just joined right now because I couldn't get a link and I couldn't just connect. Esteban has asked me to share my experience about how we engage local society into our activities we have. And since I represent development agency, regional development agency from southern Poland, from Bielsko-Biała. We are a member of EURADA for many years, and we implement different projects from different programs. And because we are a self-governmental agency, let's say, so we are like implementing the duties, responsibilities, and we help self-government with all those problems they have to solve the problems. And one of those it always was, when we implemented an S3 strategy, it suddenly appeared that that we are focusing on the very modern technologies because of the network of companies we have here, because of the history we have. We used to be a city of 1,000 industries, and we have found ourselves in a very competitive environment, because we are in very close proximity to the upper Silesia, which is highly industrialized, our regional center, and also to Kraków, Małopolska, which is very highly industrialized, and we suffer a brain drain, an enormous brain drain for our economy sector. So we need to involve. We need to engage citizens to fulfill the requirement we have for this working force, for social workers, for engaging new innovation and projects. So we have implemented the program called Fighting the Brain Drain, called Find Your Place in the Mountains. And then agency, as one of the following activities, we decided to engage citizens to just innovate the approach we have toward the unemployed, the long-time unemployed, the citizens which are can be still active on the market, to implement the digital innovation hub. This is a center. We offer capacity building activities. We offer the professional trainings for the people to fulfill the requirements. And this also with regard to the rural areas which are in the surrounding, because I'm talking about the functional area. We've implemented the smart specialization strategy, which we support with the introduction of the smart city and smart gmina software based on the blockchain solutions developed by one of our companies from our Beskid Technology Innovation Center. We also very much engage in supporting self-governments in implementation in encouraging people to take part in something which is called participative budgeting. As you all well know, in Poland there is a rule that every self-government has to establish a participative budget for the citizens of the city, which are free to use it in the on the way they want to use it, for building, for educational programs, for some regional programs. So we are very active in this, and we also implement the self-governmental support projects. So in our case, engagement of the population, this is not only the population of the city, but also the rural area around. And if some of you will be interested more, that you will find my email address and I can share our experience. But in general, it is quite good. I can say that we are very quite successful with this kind of.
I think being the municipality and a stakeholder of the INC helps a lot. We had two questions, and as well, I have someone that I want to speak. So I will ask my colleague Ivana to read the first question and then to ask for the speaker to answer in 2 minutes. Yes, Ivana.
Yes, exactly. So we have a question for Thomas. What incentives or solutions did you discover would encourage students to do their internships in the rural areas? And as you mentioned, universities do not need a physical space. How do you think digitalization would affect the gap between rural and urban areas in this aspect?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we did interviews with students in Trondheim about this question. What would it take for you to move actually after you have your degree, to move to a rural area? And this was quite frustrating. We got two types of students there in the analysis. One born and raised urban, they couldn't see the rural play any role in their future. Why should it? And then we had another type, people that had moved from rural areas to Trondheim to study there, and maybe later they might go back or to another rural area, but they couldn't imagine that this is important for them. The important thing was happening now, that they had done this move. And this analyzing this, we realized that, of course, when we're asking students that have moved to the city to get their education there, we are talking to a certain type of young person. We have to talk to young people in the rural areas, and quite obviously there's nothing intrinsic to urban life that is better than rural life. When you talk with young people from rural areas, you get a host of other qualities of this life that you don't get in an urban setting, like community, like closeness to nature, and all this. Space was mentioned. So that's there is no natural state of mind within a young person that would prescribe that this person is looking for an urban life. And in the recruitment for these rural internships, we were talking about these other values, and they were attractive for some. So the second part of the question, when you look in at the history of universities, it's actually of European universities in the medieval ages. This was a nomadic enterprise. This was scholars moving around with their students. And it's only, then it starts with Paris quite early, but only today we cannot imagine a university any longer that isn't a huge, huge building, many buildings within a city. So I think it's not only the digitalization that will do this. Also here, there's nothing natural with the universities that they need a huge bureaucratic organization. It's when you address universities as a knowledge work, as the production and the reception of knowledge, this can very well happen in a more nomadic way, which then would benefit also rural areas. There's an opportunity there.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Agatha, you have a question, but you have to answer in 1 minute, please. So, Ivana, if you could read the question for Agatha.
Yes. So this question is from Vicen for Agatha. How do you encourage citizens and small communities to participate in EDP, and how do you choose participants?
The question comes from someone like you in Valencia. So someone managing the smart specialization.
Thank you.
To present
Thank you.
a little bit.
So what we have done, it was to adapt everything we've done regionally to a smaller territory. But that required a number of preliminary consultations with the communities. So we could see, we follow the same logic, quadruple helix and economic priorities. But discussing with the communities, we understood better which are the representatives of the quadruple helix that should stay at the table. And we had many, many consultations, and which are the main topics of interest. Then we have organized the process with a technical analysis, with focus groups, with online, and we had the challenge of having the COVID pandemics, and we had to move from physical meetings to online meetings. But maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll have the occasion after, I don't know, during the same meeting today to discuss it more thoroughly. And I wouldn't like to anticipate too much. But the idea is that we had to make preliminary activities in order to reach the same level of specialization as at regional level. However, there are many challenges, and maybe we'll address them further on.
Okay, thank you, Agatha. And
thank you for the question.
We have a comment from Javier. Ivana, if you could read that as well.
Okay, so Javier says that he couldn't disagree with the participation of the general public in EDP, but at the same time, we would need to improve scientific and technical background in the general public with the STEM education. Otherwise, we can find undesired results. For example, an EDP on IoT may be attended basically by collectives against 5G, or a PDE on public health may be attended mainly by people that were said to, that are there chips in the vaccines. For this reason, he thinks that it could be more practical to try to engage associations such as patient associations, user associations, etc., in these continuous participative processes. And we also have several other comments in the chat, and so we would encourage everybody to please continue to write down your questions and your opinions in the chat, because we are reading all of them.
We will have a lot of time at the end. For example, Maite Pelayo, that I have been in contact with her before from Ibercibis Foundation, we will give you the floor after. So let's start the second part of the session, of the webinar, with recommendations and practical vision, not only the experience. And I would like to give the floor as well again to Francesco Amodeo. So, because the European Commission is facilitating the improvement of the administrative capacity. This is something that has been doing in the past, but in this case is the administrative capacity of the managing authorities of the funds to help them to involve and to engage the civil society. And there are mechanisms to help the active participation in the management of the European structure and investment funds. with the involvement of socioeconomic actors in the territory. So my question is regarding to that. So beyond the traditional sources that you do in DigiRegio to improve the administrative capacity, how could policymakers, which are not directly managing authority, get support or inspiration on their regional development programs? And from your point of view, how actors in the civil society organizations could as well learn? Because I remember you finished that is a common investment from both sides, is your intervention. So in practice, beyond the administrative capacity, what are the tools that they could use?
Thank you, Esteban. And actually, I take a couple of seconds just to introduce what we do, because it's relevant to reply to your question. I work for a competence center for administrative capacity, which the purpose of our work is to improve indeed the capacity to manage the funds. This is a competence center that started 10 years ago. And as you can imagine, the first challenge was state aid and public procurement. That's what we did. So, and this is what we did. We helped with training, with exchange to improve on these things. But today we are facing a new challenge, which is, as I was saying, new competence which are required to manage, to open the governance to the citizens. I apologize, there is the sun in my eyes. Give me 2 seconds, I have to close a window. Strangely, there is sun.
It's a luxury to have sun. I saw as well with Tine in Copenhagen, in Aarhus.
Oh, there is sun in Brussels, which is it's a nice surprise. So we want to learn more what is needed. So recently, last year, we launched 2 projects. One with OECD, where we invite managing authority, intermediate bodies to test new solutions for improving the competence. And we have 2 regions, region of Cantabria, region of Emilia-Romagna, and the agency in Poland in charge of public transport, plus the 2 joint secretariat of Interreg program, one in Belgium and the Netherlands, and the other in Bulgaria and Romania. So what we learn from this is the first things that we learn from this exercise is the following. As you learn public procurement, as you learn state aids, to manage a participatory process need resources, something that was mentioned before. And this is something that requires competence, but also financial resources. If you take the example of Besaya Europe, the one that you can Google and find it, in this case, the Cantabrian region decided to organize a citizen panel to decide on the strategy for the Besayan area. And this was an investment, really investment, both financial and resources. And they start from zero. They didn't have no experience on the topics. Today, they are convinced to do that and to go beyond. But first issue that the public authorities have to face is, I need to invest resources, as I did for public procuring, as I did for smart specialization. In the same way, you need new process, you need new competence, and you need financial resources. And that's, I think, the best way to approach, to integrate on the core business citizen participation. And the example from the other region show the same results, with additional difficulties, because as you know, the management of structural fund is in a pyramid format, in the sense at the top you have the European the Commission and the member states, but then the management, the real management go down into the details. And what we teach, what the management authority have learned about citizen participation, then have to be translated into acts by the other actors beyond, which are on the day-to-day implementation. So this is another difficulty, to bring every actor to the level. So you can prepare guidelines to how to run a citizen participation, but at the end, every single actor need to implement that guidelines and that framework. This is, I think, is the main difficulty on the side of the public authorities, to learn new competence and to invest time and resources on the citizen participation. When we go to the civil society organization, we run in parallel a grant scheme where we provide assistance, financial assistance to civil society organization to really engage with citizens from in the best way they could. What we see in that case, first of all, civil society organization is very variegated, is very linked to the territory. It's much more easy to find activity at very local level rather than at a national level. And that could be very practical. So there is extremely good will to work. There are fantastic ideas. They develop a platform, they develop games, all kind of activity you can imagine to develop. But still this remains a raw diamond, I would say, because they have idea. As for innovation, you have to bring from innovation to maturity in order to be fully deployed and have an impact on the management. And this is where civil society needs assistance. How they need assistance? First of all, in our program, in the project, it's still possible, to also provide financial assistance to the civil society so they can play a role. Either this is the monitoring of a project or also in the design of project. But also they need technical assistance to improve their own knowledge, because imagine a small civil society organization compared to a large organization of public officials which work day to day on the things. This is not comparable. So they need also assistance to bring their knowledge, their idea to the level that can have an impact to for the program or the project or the strategy, whatever the level it is. And that's what we plan to do. And I would like to conclude I will put on the chat an information about an event that we are about to organize. We have organized in the past conference about the good governance of cohesion policy. Now we are launching 4 new conferences, 4 new events on good governance. The last event that will be on 10th of March will be exactly about about including citizens in the good governance of regional policy. And we are glad to have our commissioner with us that will involve in a political debate about the topics. We will present the result in detail with the OECD about the project we have just finished, but we also have the opportunity to launch a new initiative dedicated to both the managing authorities and the civil society, because as somebody from the previous speaker says, trust is something that needs to be built. Thank you, Esteban.
Thank you to you, Mr. Amodeo. Very good insight, very practical, and as well to continue with the learning. So thank you very much. So the next speaker is Angela Simone again. She, as you know, she's an expert on civil society engagement, and she is the coordinator of the Transform project. Transform has 3 territories. The one from Brussels, they have been engaging citizens for Lombardy, for participatory research agenda, sorry for that. Brussels is circular economy and municipal waste and health service in Barcelona, in Catalonia. So considering your practical vision of these 3 territories and as well your background, how you think that regions could develop effective mechanisms to engage citizens?
Thanks, Esteban. I think I can only echo what is already mentioned by Francesco Amodeo. Transform share a similar path to what the DG region with the OECD has done or is doing with their territories. So try to really train regional authorities, professionals in the territories about citizen engagement and the different approaches and the different exercise of citizen engagement. In fact, we are dealing with 3 different approaches of citizen engagement, co-design through deliberation and participatory research agenda setting in Lombardy, in Italy, citizen science in Catalonia, and several methods of co-creation in Brussels capital region. And this is really key because, as I said before, doing citizen engagement means to really understand what are the differences between the approaches and also the strengths and the added value that these different approaches can bring to the policymaking process, because you can think to use co-design more in the strategy, in designing some strategic plan, but you need co-creation if you would like to involve citizens to harness their energy and creativity to co-create together with them a better option of solutions for societal challenges, for social innovation. So you really need to be trained and understand what are the different approaches that citizen engagement can offer to you. But before all this learning process, you really need to ask yourself as a region, as territory, why you need citizen engagement. So what is your objectives? What is your purpose? Because it's really important. If you don't have if you really don't have in your mind what is your objectives, it's difficult to select the best methodology to implement citizen engagement. So we spent in Transform the first year of the project also because of the COVID, so we didn't have the chance to have meeting in person to really discuss about the importance of focusing on the objective of the approaches of citizen engagement to be included in the policymaking process in the 3 regions. Of course, we have the resources to implement citizen engagement. We have obligation toward the European Commission to provide and produce deliverables and to deal with deadlines, but this was not our aim as a coordinator, as consortium, just to deliver what we promised to do, but to really enable an institutional change, a change in the way of doing policymaking in the 3 regions involved. So we really started from the beginning to define and to identify what were the objectives of the 3 regions in introducing these methodologies of citizen engagement. So what were the added values of collecting ideas and opinions from the local citizens in their policymaking processes? And then we identifying the best choices, the best methodologies to ground citizen engagement process in the 3 regions. Another recommendation that I can provide from our experience in Transform is to start from the experience made in citizen engagement and working side by side with some of the officials in the regional authorities involved in Transform to get and to create alliances internally and externally. Internally in the regions, because of course you might have the possibility to work with just a department in a region, but you really need to mainstream this experience to other departments, because very often, especially if you work with some strategic plan like S3 or Green Deal policies, this means to work with different kind of departments of teams like sustainability on energy, entail to work with different departments, different organizations within the regional authorities. So one experience in one department can be mainstreamed and expanded to other departments, but you really also need to involve all the stakeholders of the research and innovation sector. The usual suspect that normally are involved in producing this strategic plan, so research centers, university, and innovators, they are not used to interact directly with citizens. But if you involve in this kind of processes also in the deliberation exercise, they are really willing and enthusiastic to do such process, because they really can envisage also the added value to this unusual exercise of interact directly with their end users or the or their innovation pathways. And last recommendation is to evaluate your process, because collecting the experience, the opinions about the experience of the citizen engagement from the participants, from the citizens, can be really helpful for the regional government to really see in a concrete way what is the added value, how citizens really perceive the importance of being at the table of policy making, to be part of this process, to build up a sense of co-ownership of the policies. And this can be really a way to enhance this willingness to be committed to citizen engagement and to be share with other colleagues within the regional authorities to strengthen this process.
Thank you, Angela, Simone. Thank you very much for the practical recommendations. Being practical, in the previous round of intervention, Gorka Sanchez from the Murcia Health Service explained to you several projects and that they are dealing. And my questions are related to them. As a head of the innovation department of the health service, how we could go beyond the projects and really implement them to last longer beyond the lifetime.
Okay, thank you, Esteban. How do I think we can take an articulation initiatives that are long lasting? I think RRI could be the tool to apply transparency in the priorities about the research and innovations, connecting the projects with the society. For example, the European Commission requires all entities to have their gender equality plan published as a prerequisite for signing the grant agreement for any European project in Horizon Europe. I think this is a good example. How could we carry out projects that have an impact on advancement of healthcare services design? I think by agreeing on the previous definition of success, success goal, results, or objective, with the final users within society. I think RRI must be a recipe for success, transparency, and social empowerment of new solutions. All for the people, not without the people, like illustrated despotism, and not only with the people, but from the people. I think this is the sense of RRI.
And the reference, the historical reference has been very useful for all of us. Thank you very much, Gorka. So let's go again to Denmark, to Tine Rau. As you know, and I introduced you before, she has been working with research performing organization and analyzing the linkages between them and the civil society. How do you recommend to research performing organization to establish effective participation mechanisms? Because I remember that I come as well from the region of Gorka, and sometimes you think that the universities are in another history, which is not the civil society. How you recommend them to be aligned with the civil society?
Yes, thank you. So before I provide some more concrete recommendation, I thought I would just shortly outline some of the existing challenges to implementing public engagement, but also discuss how we can actually understand effective participatory mechanism. What do we mean when we say effective? As you can say, over the last decades, a rhetoric of deliberation, co-production, and inclusion has influenced policy and research agenda within the area of science and technologies, as you all know, and new formats of citizen and stakeholder engagement with science have emerged. And also over the years, and not least also with the promotion of RI, it is increasingly acknowledged Also, you can see from our discussion today that existing and emerging societal challenges, as well as scientific and technological advances, call for new initiatives, platforms, and opportunities also for engaging the public in non-traditional ways. But you can say that despite the fact that new democratic innovations, as well as PE formats for including society stakeholders, have been developed, put into practice, and also formalized in different both national and institutional contexts, a disparity between ideal ways of enacting public engagement, as well as the empirical realities of the de facto practical practices still exist. And this has, among other things, been explained by tension among different rationales for engaging citizens in the technoscientific decision-making processes, for instance, between instrumental, substantive, normative, imperative, as Sterling has pointed out, and also interlinked a tension between democratic openness and technocratic closure, which also details a split between efficient decision-making processes and inclusive governance. So some of the barriers, you can say that sporadic implementation of engagement activities, lack of resources in terms of money, skills, training, institutional support and time, a lack of assessment and evaluation of possible impacts, performance of public engagement activities that are merely sort of tick box exercises rather than actually being integrated as part of practice, constitute additional challenges to public engagement. And you can also say that even though there's a huge number of participatory mechanisms and resources available, just to mention a few, the web-based participedia.net that developed by Fong and Warren currently allows for traversal of more than 900 cases and 300 methods. There's also the online action catalog produced by the EU-funded project Engage that describes 52 engagement methods, and in the project that I've been in, the PE 2020 project, we encompass 76 mechanisms and 250 concrete initiatives. So I think just this sheer amount of methods and initiatives and concept can also paradoxically challenge the advancement, implementation, and evaluation of engagement activities. So, but then what are the effective participatory mechanisms? And that's really quite challenging to state. If we look at the existing literature as also in practice, and it can also be really challenging to evaluate when in public engagement activities are actually effective. So you can argue that the new and innovative public engagement initiative requires attention to hybridity in terms of methods and stakeholder combinations, also referred to as hybrid form by Callan, to reflect the empirical reality of participation, and also like that any conceptual frameworks needs to consider heterogeneous, reflexive, co-productive, and experimental forms of public representations that actually do promote democratic governance and new forms of collective imaginations, as stated by Lisson, Mayers, and Tironi. You can also say that effective innovations could also imply inclusive way of representations and reflection on actual impact, and also reflection about the actual extent of participant empowerment and governance contributions, that the meaningful participation, as also mentioned previously. So you can say that to reach a more substantial and nuanced understanding of concrete PR mechanism and initiative and their hybrid qualifications, we have to pay much more detail to processes, to context, to objectives and impacts to enhance the alignment between theory and practice. And then I reached the part of recommendations as was the actually questions that you asked, sorry. So what can we actually do to foster and promote public engagement within RPOs? You can say, to a large extent, the more general recommendations that I also mentioned in the last presentation on how to implement RI in RPOs, I think are also relevant for this particular key of public engagement. So a change of incentive structures within RPOs, change of funding instruments, and additional structural institutional support could be implemented. Also to later shared platforms of public engagement units. You can imagine someone similar to a research integrity office could be an option from where resources, training, and capacity and network building could also be offered. Also, as recommended in the Engage 2020 project, you can imagine a joint institutional platform that could enhance a closer collaboration and exchange of experience between related fields of practice, such as science, job, service learning, and citizen science.
Okay.
And also,
okay, no, it was, yes, if you could finish, Tine.
Yes, sorry, I know I talked too much. So I just want to mention on a sort of a research level, public engagement could also effectively be built into research design, research agendas, and grant proposals. And there's a lot of resources available, for instance, different kind of dialogue models, action catalog, and furthermore. And just designing and implementing peer activities and keeping stakeholders engaged are, we know, as also mentioned, are very much time and resource consuming, but they also potentially really rewarding. I just want to mention a quick example, for instance, in the EURADA project, which aims to develop ethic guidelines, code of conduct, and framework for organoid research. We have recently conducted 3 deliberative workshops with citizens and patients, among other stakeholders. And just the diversity of views, attitudes, and assessments that we obtained through these deliberative workshops constitute a unique set of data that would have been really difficult to obtain without such public engagement activities. Sorry for going over time.
No problem. I was looking for the project Engage and I found 2. Could you please put the link in the chat and the other resources, the one that you say engage.net or something like that?
Yes. I'll do that.
While you were speaking, I was trying to find and I was not able. I find 2 project Engage and I don't know which one you refer to and the other one. So thank you, Tine. I have more or less the similar question for Thomas Berken. As you saw in the first round, he is working in the Trondenlag communities and as well in the university. And my question is how we can use citizen participation to align the objectives of the university with the policy makers, and if there are any specific actions on citizen science that we could recommend to make this alignment better, to combine the interests of both sides.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for me to address this as a technical question, how to do this in a more efficient, technically more efficient way. I think for me and for based on the work that we have done, an important keyword here would be local relevance. So when research and what universities and university leaders are doing, when it is seen as relevant for citizens, then citizen science and engagement is much easier to achieve. And it's very difficult to replace this kind of engagement by engaging someone through certain technologies, like the 500, 900 different technologies. I'm not against this. In many cases, we will have to use the best methods that we have. But one step before this would be for me to look into the huge distance that has to be crossed, the gap that has to be closed between those that are to be engaged and what they are to be engaged in. So the larger the distance, the more work we have to do and the better we have to be to engage. So for me, I would therefore start at another point, and this is how can we close this gap? How can we make both decisions by policymakers and politicians and university and knowledge production at university? How can we get this closer to what is seen as relevant for citizens? I think relevance, well, what does this mean? It's of course solving problems for people. And I'm not romanticizing this. In the chat we heard about 5G skeptics and all this, which is, I mean, this kind of, I don't want to do the science that is relevant for vaccine skeptics, but I think we have toyed around with the concept of well-being a lot recently. And well-being has the advantage that it includes health, which is measurable, but it also includes softer parameters like belonging, like community. How does my science, or how does our science, do our political decisions, how do they contribute to the well-being of a citizen? And I think then we have it's much easier to engage people when you are asking. And I like Tina's point that when you conduct these workshops, then you're confronted with a world of knowledge about what is relevant and what is important for the different groups. So I think getting closer to citizens is the first step. And then we have to resort to technologies of participation. And this connects, of course, what I said before. That's only one way of thinking about getting closer in terms of closing the gap between an urban kind of global international excellent science and rural communities. But I think we have a lot of these gaps to bridge, and that will make it much easier for us to engage and to become engaged in local issues.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And going from the rural Norway, let's go to the rural Romania as well. As we spoke before, the IDR Northeast is a managing authority, and they work normally with local action groups in this rural environment. And Agatha, my question is regarding your recommendations to other development agencies, as we discussed before. How you recommend not to be so much centralized as you did in Northeast Romania? How you recommend to cover the potentialities and to engage? Let me say again that word, the whole territory, and to not to be focused in the capital cities or the main cities.
Yes, thank you. On one side, we have to admit that where you have a capital city, you have capital potential. They are the best in research. Usually they are economic and development poles. So it is true that their prevalence in decision-making has to be somehow proportional. However, what we want to pay attention is to not lose any important input from the region. You cannot decentralize ad infinitum. You have to put some limits, and you have to be careful when you choose what to decentralize first of all, and to what type of smaller units you want to address all this process. So first thing will be the choice of micro territories that you want to include in the decentralizations, because now we're talking about this geographical decentralization, and I said as topical decentralization, we already have it. We address ecosystems, sectoral, economic ecosystems. So in this respect, there is a decentralization. However, in what regards territorial decentralization, geographical decentralization, first of all, you have to be very careful when you choose the micro territories, because you want to have a potential of multiplication. So once you prototype some methods and you test it in a micro territory, you have to be sure that then other similar entities can draw on this experience and adopt the processes and improve their activity. So first of all, the choice of micro territory is very important. A second aspect would be to be as attentive and thoroughly as possible in the same manner as you do at regional level. For instance, if we talk about this entrepreneurial discovery process, we were as rigorous at smaller scale as we were at larger scale. Of course, there are challenges, but the process followed the same steps. We made a rigorous economic analysis, a desk research. Following on this desk research, we identified some economic sectors with potential. That means you have a critical mass of companies and you have research and innovation potential, that is capacity in the region addressing those critical masses of companies. So the rigor in selecting the fields you address, the domains, the economic domains you address should be the same. Then, because they are remote areas sometimes and maybe you lack important information, it is essential to accompany this desk analysis with some consultations with the relevant players in the region. relevant from an economic point of view, from a social point of view, from a political point of view, maybe, and if possible, with entities that have a say in the innovation process. We were fortunate, for instance, in our TeRRItoria process to have some research facility in the territory, and this was one of the criteria that we have chosen. Maybe in other territories there is not a research unit in the micro territory, but you may have some research unit at the regional level that can address the issues that are relevant for those communities. Second, when working with smaller communities, we cannot expect the same level of involvement and of understanding. And first of all, of understanding. So some preliminary steps were necessary. That is why, although the full development process involves quadruple helix players, that is academia, companies, authorities, and civil society, we prefer to make two phases. So to initiate dialogue, first of all, within the communities in triple helix, because we wanted to understand better the perception of the people on their priorities, on their points, or strong points, and on their needs. So first, we did not go into the territory and ask, what do you want to innovate? People would got scared. So we said, what are your needs? Where are you strong? In which are you stronger than the others? Which are your strengths and which are your needs and which are your challenges? Once we discussed that and we built a SWOT with these communities, then, of course, we try to help them to prioritize those challenges. There was one question about confirmation bias that I'm not sure if it was addressed also to Romanian side or also to Norway experiment. But anyway, to be sure that you have the right interlocutors, of course, you make a mapping of the relevant stakeholders. So if you have a good desk analysis and you have good consultations and you have an image of who you are discussing with, then you have literally to make an inventory of all those possible relevant stakeholders. It takes a while, but it gives you a better picture on who to invite at the round table of this process. So, as I said, we had activities in triple helix. It was focus groups. Then we invited academia. And academia was invited once the communities were more or less sure of what they need and what they would want, what they would commit to solve. Because this is one problem to have needs, and it's another problem to have commitment to solve the needs. And as we pay attention to this aspect at regional level, we pay the same attention at community level. Nobody wants to waste time in providing solution and discussing with you if you're not willing to solve these problems, and if you're not committed to invest something. If you invest time, you invest human resources, but most of all, you have to invest money. You can invest money by accessing financing programs, or you can invest money by accessing credits from banks or maybe other community resources. Without a commitment to solve problems, nobody will engage in dialogue. So once we clarified more or less these things with the communities, I say more or less because it was the first exercise. Of course, everything can be improved. But once we had a clear view on what we are looking for, we invited academics. And first of all, we presented them with the situation online, in a consultation online, and asked them to see the priorities in the communities and to reprioritize them from a potential of solutions with innovation. Because the innovation potential is something that we are looking for in smart specialization. Not all problems, but only those that can receive solutions via innovation. When the academics presented their opinions, then we organized a quadruple helix dialogue, and we put everybody at the same table. People restated their SWOT, they exchanged opinions, they improved their idea of what can be solved in a community. Then it was a new priority of challenges, and we come to meet their needs with this platform of brokerage between communities and research communities, because between users and those who are providing services of research and innovation. So to make a long story short, is to be as rigorous in approaching micro communities as you are in regions. Of course, there are challenges, and some of the challenges we have encountered, it was first of all to address less or not specialized public, because at regional level
we had to finish because we have a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, so that's all. With
the responsible regions dialogue, the more we go, the closer we are to the end, the most interesting it becomes.
So just pay attention to asymmetries and try to overcome them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you for giving so practical approaches. We have an interesting and very long comment from Lilian. I'm going to ask my colleague Ivana to read that. We probably will have answers from Mr. Amodeo and probably others.
Yes, so the comment from Lilian, a discussion point and concern from the practitioner side from Trondelag County Authority in Norway with regard to citizen engagement. There needs to be a clear difference in the type of citizen engagement that local politicians and government officials do. Otherwise, we risk blurring the lines between elected representatives and public servants in a way that undermines democracy. It is the role of politicians to engage and represent their electorate, and public servants need to be careful of relying on the opinions of single citizens. Echoing or interpreting Javier Alvarez's comment here, I do not see it as the role of public servants to engage with individual citizens in policy processes. Participatory mechanisms in policy development or implementation cannot substitute democratic processes around and between elections, but perhaps it is necessary to innovate around how different policy processes enhance each other.
Very much for these interesting comments. And then I wonder if Mr. Amodeo wants to give an answer to this question, because it's very aligned with the debate.
Thank you, Esteban. I think a comment from Lilian and Nikos are very, very interesting, and it's an open debate. First of all, no doubt that the election is probably the most important democratic moment for in Europe at national level and regional level. But that's not the only unique moment for citizens to participate to democratic life. There are the Conference on the Future of Europe at the moment that is working. One of the topics is democratic life. One of the recommendations that I noticed coming from the citizen was we want to participate more on decision on public investment. So one doesn't exclude the other. Of course, the level is different, and the details that and the issues to be tackled are not the same. And I would say that the public sector indeed needs to engage with the citizen. Of course, how to do. And this, the partnership response is very clear. It's not about taking the position of one specific person, but the relevance of the person representative are the key principles to be applied. And if you think about the issue, this is not something new. It's always existed. Before it was not called citizen, it was called social economic operator, it was called other actors. I don't know if you read many programs, but it happens to me to read the programs and how the consultation process happens. And an expression that unfortunately come out quite often as these are the usual suspects. What does it mean? It means that we consult the same. And here in a different format is exactly the same questions. Are we really engaging and open to all relevant actors? It's not to find one or two specific person, but the relevant actor. So the subject, the objectivity. And this requires an enormous investment from the public sector to properly run the exercise. So it's not substituting the democratic process expressed by the political elected people, but is complementing, because there is a need from citizens to have more participation on day-to-day life. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you to you for the insights. Ivana, could you read the one of Alentejo, the one done by Rosa?
We have a question by Rosa Onofre from Alentejo. When we talk about citizens, shouldn't we start with the engagement from the university students, the one nearest the investigation? Are they already engaged? Is that work being done? This question is not directed towards a specific person, so anybody could chime in.
Maybe Tine, thank you very much from the research performance organizations. Thank you very much.
I can try to say something. I think it's really good questions, and I don't think it's either or. So either we engage citizens or we have students. So, but I think it's a way of building RI and public engagement into a different kind of structures and different kind of stakeholders at level also at universities. And I'm sure much more can be done also to involve students in these processes. I think there's already some mechanism, for instance, science shops and so forth, where student can engage with the actually real life problems and research projects. So that's one way of building in public engagement through these science shops, so really interesting mechanisms. But I guess, of course, more can be done also in terms of training, in terms of how we as researchers discuss these matters with our students. But just to say that there are already existing mechanisms for involving students. So, but I don't think that this should stand alone. Researchers should also be including public engagement in their research proposal, research agendas, and so forth. So, yeah. But thank you for the questions. I hope this will answer.
We have Maite Pelayo as well from the University of Zaragoza, and the foundation is called Ibercivis. I wonder if you could take the floor and as well to give your vision about what we are discussing. Thank you, Maite, for being here.
Thank you very much, all of you, because it's amazing and very, very interesting for me, and I'm learning a lot. And congratulations above all. So regarding the last comment, I was involved in the answer and in the question because we at Ibercivis develop citizen science, which means science or research more in general, doing by the people. And people are academic researchers and not academic researchers. And it many times sounds a bit challenging or maybe, I don't know, provocative because many of you have direct or indirectly talked about citizen science. But there are people thinking that only academic people is able to do science or research. But the facts say the contrary. And there are many people doing research in different levels, and we at Ibercivis promote this type of research not only outside the research centers, but everywhere. I mean, we understand that research many times, the most of times, is done in a collaborative way, and this type of collaboration can be done between different types of agents. And we, at Ibercivis, we coordinate the Observatory of Citizen Science in Spain. We develop our own citizen science projects, many times by ourselves, but many other times with the university or with other universities in Spain or across Europe, or with research centers, or with communities outside academics, or as a consortium shaped by different types of stakeholders. And we research citizen science too. And we, in particular, we know more than 300 of citizen science projects in Spain. And only in Ibercivis, we, since 2007, have developed more than 80 initiatives of citizen science with more than 70,000 of participants. And regarding the question of this webinar, regarding the involvement of civil society, many times we say, oh, researchers are citizens too. And the point in the policies, and what I want to focus is on the idea that research cycle and policy cycle are very close. And when people, I or you, I have a background on physics, education, or whatever, and philosophy of science, but when I am participating in a project related to rivers and bioindicators, I didn't know nothing about that, but I can. And my last point is that with citizen science has inputs for policies and vice versa.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
This is precisely what I wanted to say. From the other side, let me say that today democratic institution needs to be more connected with citizens, and as well the entities that are implementing the policies, the day-to-day policies, the economic policies. We believe, and I think we have shown in this session, that responsible research and innovation could provide value added to how we design the policies and how we make them more aligned with the requests and the needs there. So now that we are involving from the European context in the programming period 21-27, and we have just started, RRI is showing that it's a very useful tool for regional economic practitioners, and I think we have shown today in this session of citizen engagement. For those of you who like today, I kindly recommend you to come here next Thursday. There we will go beyond that. So we will see all the topics that are connected with responsible research and innovation, like gender, ethics, education, the STEM education, and we will try to foster how they are specifically implemented on the day-to-day of the regional authorities or the local government. It's what we call the regionalization of responsible research and innovation. This will take place next Thursday from 2 to 4 again. And I recall you that the next week on Tuesday, we will have the expert from the Joint Research Center, Mikel Landavaso, and as well Mr. McCann for explaining and to dream how will be the next generation of a smart specialization strategy, with some expert as well connected with responsible research and innovation. Thank you very much. Thank you for my team but they have worked a lot to promote this event and organize this, and especially thanks to those people who has contributed and the ones who has writing and provided value added to the debate. Bye-bye and see you on Tuesday. On Thursday. Today is Tuesday.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.